I know a man, Mark, who was raised by a father who was critical and demeaning and condescending and cruel for, well, Mark's entire childhood and young adulthood and, well, pretty much his whole life, because parents aren't cruel for, 2 or 3 years just for kicks and then otherwise loving. And when I met Mark, he treated me just like I was his father, which is, of course, the nature of PTSD. It's also the nature of childhood. If, as a child, you're treated with criticism and you're demeaned and people are condescending, you're going to feel pain everywhere you go. The only conclusion a child can make is if there are monsters under the bed at home and in the closet at home, then there are monsters under everybody else's beds and in everybody else's closets. And then, frankly, let me think, under the chairs and in your school desk and everywhere, because you learn that the world is a harsh and painful and critical and really frightening and terrible place. So naturally, when he met me, he treated me like I was his father. I was an adult male like his father, although pretty much he learned the whole world was a painful, frightening place. And he viewed me as having a position of authority. So I became his dad. What does that mean? Well, he was afraid and naturally, reflexively defensive. And in his case, everybody chooses different ways to defend themselves. Some people retreat into nothingness. Some people get drunk, whatever. One of his most common defenses was to be right about everything. Now, here's where it gets a little different from childhood. As a child, he didn't choose to be right with his father because his father had all the cards. His father had all the guns, all the bullets, all the baseball bats, all the everything. So as a child, he just retreated in a little ball and curled up in his bed and sucked his thumb and cried. But he learned that if he defended himself by being right, by being knowledgeable, by being more aggressive at school, for example, or at work or everywhere except home, briefly he felt a little less helpless, hopeless, powerless. So with me, he was afraid and right about everything. If you're going to defend yourself, well, then defend yourself thoroughly. He had learned with his father that there was no defense. So instead, he had learned to defend himself with everybody else. That's not uncommon at all. But now it was affecting absolutely every aspect of his life. He had no friends, none. He had never had a long-term relationship. He was in his 40s. Difficulties with all of his jobs, you can imagine. If every boss became the authority figure that was like his father, and he went to either curl up in a ball and suck his thumb or defend himself by being right, bosses don't respond all that well to either one. It affected his relationships with friends, girlfriends, everybody. It not only distances himself from people being right, but people don't like being treated like they're monsters that they have to be defended against. And people sense that when you defend yourself. You defend yourself with somebody, and after a while, they will start to get some kind of aggressive. That's a very common thing. So I spent some time with Mark to help him see that he could break this cycle by realizing that events now were different. Create different events, event, judgment, feeling, reaction. New events leading to different judgments, different feelings, and then different reactions. That is the treatment for PTSD, is creating new events. Or reviewing the old events and creating new judgments, but it still involves creating new events because now you're reviewing old events, but you're doing it with love, so that makes it a new event. That's how you treat PTSD. That's how you treat PCSD. That's how you treat pain. Right there. So he got a new job. And he wrote to me. He said, today at work, as I was working on a calculation at the computer, my supervisor gave me a suggestion. It was something simple, but potentially important. For a split second, I felt that old resistance rise up inside me as like I was going to throw up. Just anger, defensiveness. I was going to be right. I was going to tell the boss how I was doing it good enough and to leave me alone. Yeah, I bet. It's a really old and powerful reaction to people in the past. In this case, mostly your dad. It's a reflex. You don't choose it. It's not a choice at all. It's just a reflex. The initial resistance is not your fault, and it's called, and we've talked about this subject many times, that's called a trigger, something that reminds you of a past event. And then you react to it as though it were the past event, even though it's not. You continue. I was about to defend myself. No kidding. That's why they call it a trigger. And say, what I'm doing will work just fine. But instead, I did what you suggested that I do. And for those of you who are listening, what I've been suggesting for several of the past video chats. Back to him. You say, I did what you suggested I do. I shut my mouth and paused. That's all. I didn't go, oh, well, somebody loves me and everything's going to be fine. I didn't go through all the things I'd learned. Nope. I just shut my mouth and paused. And then I remembered that defending myself had never, ever worked for me in the past. Never made me happy, never made me closer to people, nothing good. And in that 2-second pause, somehow I stopped myself from speaking the defense. Oh, I hope everybody's listening to this, because this is a miracle. If any of you have ever claimed not to have witnessed a miracle, you can't claim that anymore, because this is one. The parting of the Red Sea, just water. The changing of a human judgment, the changing of a human soul, the change in the joy of a human being, that's a miracle. And we talked about that. So he experienced the trigger, which is defined as an emotional exaggeration that just comes out of nowhere. You don't even have to know the why. You don't have to say, well, now, this reminds me of my father when he, no, you don't need to do all that. If you suddenly go from relatively calm to relatively not, especially if you can actually get to the point where you call it anger, but calm to gone, that's a trigger. What do? You pause. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to analyze it. In fact, in the moment of a trigger, you don't have time for that, which is why I simplify it down to one word. Pause. If it helps you better to say shut up, that's fine with me. But pause, don't speak. Then ask yourself, do I really want to keep doing this? What you're about to do? Defend yourself, get angry. Do I really want to do this? And then, what do I want to do instead? That's how easy it is to deal with triggers. I'm not saying you'll succeed every time. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I am saying that it's simple. Pause. Shut up. There. How much easier can we make it than this? Or simpler? You continue. The writer. And then I realized that she, my supervisor, the one giving the suggestion, was not criticizing or attacking me. She was just doing her job and actually giving me really useful information. Remember, this is a new job. She was not criticizing me. And you write 1, 2, 3, 5 exclamation marks. Because it's such a novel concept that somebody could say, possibly not like this, try that, without criticizing you. This is just like a new thought. Exactly. And this is how you get rid of PTSD. You just did it. You just did the whole sequence. You were triggered. Can't help that. You paused. Do I really want to do this? What do I want to do differently? I'm going to pause long enough to see what she's really doing. Oh, my goodness. She's helping me. Who would have thought? You just short-circuited the whole usual pattern, and PTSD and PTSD begin to melt away. You changed the judgment, is what you did. Now, listen to this part. This is him still speaking. What's fascinating is that and this is really well said, I had to not react. I had to choose not to defend myself. Now, the trigger I couldn't help, but I chose not to defend myself before I could see the truth of the situation, before I could see the new judgment. I'm not sure anybody's ever written to me and said this ever. If I had defended myself, I would have become completely blind, and then I would not have seen the truth. I would have justified myself. I would have justified my anger, which have made me more angry. I would have defended myself some more, and probably in the space of, 15 minutes, gotten fired. I would have defended my defending. And in seconds, I would have slid straight into the hell of defending and misery that I've known all my life. Oh, that's just brilliant. Exactly right. Hence the pause. The second you feel triggered. If you hadn't paused, you would have slid straight into hell and you would never have changed your judgment. That's why it has to be really simple. Pause. Stop. Nobody around you is going to notice that you've paused because you're just going to look thoughtful. In fact, if you're a public speaker, listen to people speak in public and they say, or some variation on all the time. Even some presidents have done this. People have been coached in public speaking and they say, What's better? Just pause. Just pause. Because the entire audience is now going, woo, he's about to emphasize a point. I wonder what he's going to say next. They actually think you're being brilliant when you're pausing, when the truth is you can't remember what you were going to say next. You pause the second you feel triggered. Without the pause, we are screwed because we begin that spiral that you talked about, straight into hell and misery. We repeat old patterns. Nothing changes. You conclude, this might be just a tiny observation. No. But somehow, I suspect this was actually a huge step in the right direction for my progress toward being happier and generally easier to be around for others. No kidding. It was a huge thing that you did to pause in the moment. Huge for you and huge for the rest of us to hear your successful experience. So thanks. New subject. A man writes, my boss is a monster. Loud, critical, angry, accusing, blaming. How do I deal with this jerk? It's highly unlikely that he's going to accept unconditional love. So this is me talking, by the way. I should have paused and said it was me instead of him because he hasn't come to this conclusion yet. So you've got this angry, loud, accusing boss. If you give him a hug and say everything's going to be okay, he'll be stunned, to be sure, but it probably won't go well after that. So loving him, a little hard for him to take and probably impossible for you to give at this point. So what can you give him? You can give him attention, which is not quite love, but as close to love as he can accept. You can give him kind attention, which pretty much everybody likes. What would that look like? What would kind attention look like? This is something that is the very first part, in most cases, of the process of loving. It's the first thing you can do. It's the most important part of loving. It's the thing you can learn to do the fastest. Learning how to be unconditionally loving is a lifetime process. But this part, you can learn relatively quickly. I've seen people learn how to do this in minutes. What am I talking about? Kind attention. Listen. Just listen to him. Listen. We don't listen very well. Like the man we talked about here in the beginning. He said that when somebody speaks to him and even offers a suggestion, what's the first thing that he's always tended to do? Boom! Defend himself. Claim that he's right. Be angry. He's done because he's not listening. The instant the other person senses you're not listening to them, they may not know what unconditional love is, but they know what not loving is. They got lots of experience with that. And if you're not listening, you're done because you're not loving them. In fact, you are not only not loving them, but you're doing not loving, meaning you're being unloving. Listening is a form of love, and your boss is likely to feel it. So ignore the bluster. Ignore the noise and the criticism and the demanding and his tone of voice and all that foolishness, and listen to him. Let me illustrate. I had a boss once, many years ago, who was frightening to everyone. If he stepped out into the hallways emptied like roaches disappearing into the cracks when the lights are turned on. He was angry. He bullied pretty much everybody he came in contact with. He was intentionally unkind. Now, I usually say that people don't mean to be unkind. This man actually took a real delight in being unkind to people because he liked to see them squirm. He was looking for weaknesses. He would exploit them. He would giggle about it later because I got to know him pretty well. He liked taunting people, making fun of them, belittling them, demeaning them. It was actually pretty mean. He tried that with me. I just listened to him. I didn't say, you realize that you're taunting and being condescending and demeaning and that that's not very loving. He would have thought that was pretty funny. I listened. So he would bluster and carry on and blah, 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 and like he did about everything. And I would just wait till he was done. And then I would summarize his core message. So he'd bluster for 3 or 4 minutes and nobody ever listens. And how can anybody be so stupid as to the usual thing that bullies do? So I'd wait till he was done, whether he was talking to me or a group of people. And then I would say, so I would raise my hand, meaning it's my turn. And here's this great big bully. And as soon as I would raise my hand, he'd stop talking. And the people around me are looking at me like, do you have magic in those hands? And I'd say, so what you're saying is that you would like, and then I would just summarize his tirade. I would leave out all the expletives and all the criticizing and the condescending. So like, for example, I would say, so you would like somebody to go upstairs and see the 2 patients on the 4th floor who are immediately post-op. Do I have that right? And he would just look floored. Or I would say, so help me understand. Because if it was, sometimes it wasn't clear and all the blustering, there wasn't a request. And I couldn't tell what he wanted. So I'd say, so name one thing that you would like me to do. Even if it was a group of people, describe to me one thing you'd like me to do. Because all the things you don't like, I didn't say this out loud, boring. Who cares? You could list to me 100 things you don't like. I still don't know what you want me to do. So I would ask him, so what would you like me to do? And I'm giving you several examples of listening. So I'm not saying do any particular one of these or repeat them, but I'm giving you examples of what it would look like to listen. A third example would be I would just volunteer to do jobs that nobody else wanted to do. I already knew that nobody liked to do, whatever. For example, on a retinal case, if you were the assisting surgeon, boring during the entire 3 hours of the retinal detachment repair, the assistant sits there. This is a certified physician, somebody who's passed their national boards, is doing their surgical residency, is reasonably skilled and reasonably smart, and they sit there for 3 hours with a bottle with saline solution in it and drop water on the front of the eye. Pretty boring. So when I say I listened, I made the assumption that he was having a hard time finding people who enjoyed doing that job, which it turns out was true. And so I would just volunteer to do things like that. I'd say, well, do you want somebody to help on this retinal case? That's listening proactively before he even speaks. See? Because I wasn't afraid. He became like a puppy. No kidding. When he was around me, he stopped yelling. In fact, he even quit making fun of other people. He hung around me. He would come and watch me operate. He invited me to his house, which had never happened before. Never yelled at me again. Never accused me of anything. We had a lovely relationship. He got drunk every day after work, and if I'd been a drinker, I would have gotten drunk probably every day after work, but he excused me from doing that part. He just enjoyed being loved, which in his case just meant being listened to. How does this apply to you? To the person who's writing and saying, how do I handle my boss? You say, some version of what I said to my boss. So here's what you're telling me, here's what you're saying, and here's what I'll do about it. See, so first you listen to what the boss was saying amongst all the yada, yada, yada. And here's what I'll do. And then in 2 weeks, I'll come back to you for follow-up to see if that particular task or pattern has improved. Does that work for you? I'm just giving you one example of how you could do it. There's, depending on what he's saying, 100 ways to go. But do you see how much listening there is in there? And accountability. I'm hearing you. Here's what I'm going to do. And I'm listening to you so well. In 2 weeks, I'm going to come back and make sure that I'm doing it. You know how many times bosses keep arguing after that? I'll do it and I'll come back for follow-up. Never. So the man who's writing said, well, I'll go try it. And he did. He went and he said to his boss some version of one of the examples that I gave you. And he said, this loud, angry, impossible boss melted like warm butter. He became cooperative. He became kinder. He became nice to me. He said, I like working for this guy now. And all because of what? Well, the question that we ask either at the beginning or in the middle or the end of every video chat we do. How would things be different if you brought more love into this situation? Again, there's no hugging and kissing of your boss, but listening is loving. So how would things be different? Well, in the case of this man who's writing, a lot different. Their relationship's entirely different. And this man's guaranteed to do better on the job. New subject. I can't talk enough about the effects that we have on a child when we teach anything other than I love you, along with how to be loving and responsible. Now, sometimes I talk about the effects of saying, I don't love you. Notice I said it a little differently here. I can't say enough about the effects when we teach anything other than I love you, along with teaching them how to be loving and to be responsible. Those are the 3 things we teach. That's it. We love and teach those 3 things. I worked with one woman in real love for, about 6 years. One day I don't know what made me do this, but she'd been particularly difficult. And I looked up roughly how many pages of emails I'd exchanged with her. It was at least 3,000 pages of emails with one person. Not kidding. That's easy. Could have been more. She was raised in a home where social services would never have been called. Nobody was being beaten or thrown down the stairs or starved to death or kept out of school or hanged by the neck. But she was given absolutely no sense of value. Nobody from social services would have noticed that. She was dismissed as unimportant, like, I'm busy, go away. She was occasionally criticized, but not that much. Not yelled at least hardly at all that she remembers. And I've had an opportunity to talk to somebody who was raised in her home with her sibling, and apparently there wasn't yelling. But no, this girl was just mostly not valued. That's all. She was made to feel small when she made mistakes. So all that takes when a child makes mistakes is a sigh, rolling your eyes. Eventually, when she's like 30 years old and was feeling absolutely worthless in the world and didn't complete her education and had never had a job and had no skills and did nothing but sit in the basement and get fed pretty much like a pet, I helped her move out of her parents' basement, move to another city, get a job. She had been taught the message that she was defective. She translated it more simply into just, I'm bad, I'm bad. She said those phrases, she said that particular phrase many, many times. Her I'm bad message just kept playing over and over and over in her head. I'm bad, I'm not worth anything, I'm not valued. Again and again, because she was taught it for the first 30 years of her life without interruption. Imagine hearing absolutely the same song all day, every day for 30 years. You'd go crazy. In fact, that's one way that they torture people. So anytime things got difficult, she would be terrified of making mistakes. Well, why? Because then it would be confirmed that she was bad. And then that led, because she was afraid, when people are afraid, they don't make good decisions. That led to more mistakes. And then she was bad again. And then that would spiral, and then she would just give up. So she got a job in the new city, and she lost that job because she was so afraid of making mistakes that then she would sit around and do absolutely nothing. She would take breaks of 4 hours and go to the restroom, because in the restroom, well, she made fewer mistakes, except that, well, she wasn't showing up for a job she was being paid for. And it turns out that your boss doesn't like to pay you for 4 hours of sitting in the restroom. So she'd get fired. She got one job after another, after another. And on the whole, these jobs would last for, I'd say an average of 3 days, roughly. I think she went for a week once, but about 3 days. Or no days at all. She has gotten and lost more jobs than you can even imagine. Beyond belief. She's gone from one government-sponsored home to another. She was homeless for a while, finally got housing, and then recently got another job, the hardest yet to get, because can you imagine her filling out a job history? You apply for a job and it says, tell us about your last 5 jobs. Well, I worked 1 day, no days, 3 days, 4 days. That'd be a tough job history to write down and still get a job. But she did somehow manage to get another job. And she'd been working for 1 day, and then she wrote me. And she said this, quote, I screwed everything up. Last night, before the next day's work, in the early morning hours, I was obsessing over my past failures. You hear it? I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. And how I attack people. I knew that I was going to blow it all up the next day because, well, I'm bad. So then there was no chance that I could sleep. So I obsessed, and although she doesn't say this here, what's she obsessing about? I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. I couldn't stop seeing those thoughts, and I got myself so wired up, I couldn't sit still, and I got crazy, pacing, sobbing through the night. So you can imagine how well rested she was the next morning. She said, I felt like a monster, which is another way of saying, I'm bad, I'm bad. Are you hearing this refrain? This is the same song over and over again from birth. She continues, the thing is, I know it was not the timing of facing it. In other words, this wasn't a good time to face my pain. It was bound to come up at work or on another day. So I decided to face it anyway, to face my pain right then at home, rather than have it pop up in the middle of a busy workday. When you're crazy, that may sound like that sentence didn't make any sense, by the way. That's because it didn't. When people are crazy enough in pain, and when they're screaming, I'm bad to themselves, they don't make sense. And they don't make reasonable decisions. She continues. So at about 4:10 in the morning, I finally went to bed just to rest. And at 4:40, my alarm went off to get ready for work. I got up. I remembered that I was loved. I calculated that there was no way in the world I had the physical or emotional reserve to go to work, that I was going to fail because she was, guess, bad. And there was no way I was going to make it on 2 hours of sleep. I didn't have the energy to face people. So I turned off the alarm. I went to bed and slept for 13 hours. I didn't call work and tell them that I wasn't coming in. Nothing. I just didn't show up. And then when I woke up, I was feeling so good. My head pressure was relieved, and I was feeling sane again because, well, she'd avoided the mistakes that she was unavoidably going to make at the first day of, her second day of work. She said, all I cared about was that I was rested and back on the planet. What she really means is safe, sort of. A kind of temporary safety that she's learned all of her life. And then, of course, not showing up to her second day of work. Bosses don't do really well with that. When you miss half of your first 2 days, not a good predictor of future success. She felt like a complete failure again. Bad. And now she's done this cycle over and over, not just with her job, but with uncounted people who have tried to help her. She's gone through the entire Real Love community. She's gone through everybody that she knows at church, at social services, with the government. Name an agency or a helping organization or a religious organization or anybody who helps people who are homeless or looking for a job or need food, and she's run through all of them. Because then when she feels bad about herself, she lashes out. She alienates everybody. She never shows up at the time she's supposed to show up. Then she feels bad again, and the cycle just goes straight into the toilet. This is the cycle that we were talking about earlier with the 40-something-year-old man who had the new job, who would go to defend himself with his boss, but he remembered to pause. Same cycle, at least pretty similar cycle. He remembered to pause. He changed everything. She doesn't remember to pause. She just does the cycle till she's just buried in the bowels of the earth. Then she overanalyzes, overthinks, feels worse, finds a job, and does it again. What's my point? We all do variations of this. No kidding. This just looks particularly egregious, like, well, nobody could be that irresponsible. It's not about being irresponsible. It's about being in that much pain and repeating the same message over and over. We've all done it with somebody, with a child, with a spouse, with a boss, with a coworker, with a parent, with a brother, a sister, with somebody. The effect of the childhood message that we get about how life is and who we are can be utterly overwhelming. What a responsibility we have as parents as we teach our children, eh? A little scary, and yet really hopeful if we're willing to learn. New subject. I was doing some work pouring concrete outside on one of a million projects. It's a lot of work pouring concrete. You can't stop halfway through a concrete project. There's no such thing. I'll finish this later. I'll come back tomorrow and finish the surface of the concrete. Not one of your options. So after severe exertion, sometimes the older I get, the more I get cramps. Well, they really hurt. But sometimes I can't stop in the middle of the job, even though I know I'm going to get cramps later. Oh, I replenish electrolytes and water and do all that stuff, and sometimes I still get them. And it's similar with our lives. Sometimes it's just dang hard work, and sometimes there's not an easier way. And it's worth it to keep going and learning the lessons and doing the work and persisting and doing whatever it takes to get rid of the old habits, to quit being angry, to eliminate our PTSD, and to learn how to be responsible, loving, and happy. But it can be a struggle with unfamiliarity as we're learning to do new things. And so we get emotional cramps, just like I get physical cramps. And baby, they hurt. There's sometimes I just want to cry when my legs hurt enough. And when we get emotional cramps, we tend to quit the exertion. We tend to quit the labor. We tend to quit the effort. We quit the journey because of the discomfort. We can't put up with the discomfort, so we just stop. Well, you're not going to get cramps if you lie on the couch and eat Cheetos for the rest of your life. You're just not going to, because you're not going to get dehydrated and you're not going to overexert your muscles. And one thing you ain't going to get is cramps. No kidding. And then we go right back to the same old patterns. Now, we don't have cramps, but we ain't got anything else either. We got kind of lives that are just shells. So we defend ourselves. We isolate ourselves. We're addicted to being right or drinking or whatever. We have no life. We're dead, emotionally dead, because we're afraid of the cramps. So how do we learn to live? We have to be willing to endure the discomfort. We have to be willing to sometimes exert ourselves past what's comfortable and experience the cramps that come with the effort. It's not going to happen all your life. You're not going to have cramps all day long, but they are going to happen occasionally. And there's just no way around them. If you want to avoid them, you can, but the price is worse. It's death. New subject. After that cheery little subject. This person writes and says, on several occasions, actually, it's not somebody who writes, it turns out it's me. I was writing to myself. On several occasions, as I've been working on my computer, it has fairly suddenly become slow and like it was resisting me. I'd hit a key and it would just, like, you could just hear it thinking, going, I don't know, seems like too much trouble. He's hit the, function 4 key. What do y'all think? Should we respond or not? It just acted just stupid. Each function, opening each program, and this would just sort of come out of nowhere. It used to just puzzle me. It was inconvenient. I use my computer, quite a bit and type fairly quickly. So when it responds slowly, I really notice it. And I asked the computer guy, why would this happen out of the blue? And he would check it and he'd say, I don't know, because of course, when he checked it, it's like when you take your car in that's making this noise to the car place. Well, the noise is gone. But I finally noticed that at the end of the day, where it had done that little slow thing, when I would shut it down for the night, instead of the usual options, which are usually just 3, you can make it go to sleep, you can shut it down, or you can restart it. Those are the 3 options. I don't know what your computer says. I'm sure the superior Mac users of the world say, oh no, we have much better options than that. I like to tease Mac users just as they like to tease me for my PC. So sleep, shut down, restart. But I would notice at the end of a day where it did the slow thing that the options were different. There was sleep still, but shut down and restart were replaced with update and shut down, and update and restart. I thought. Every time it acts funny like that, I get a change in the shutdown and restart messages. So I asked a computer person about that. That they knew about. They said, something's being downloaded onto your computer. Your computer is being prepared for the complete download and upgrade to be finished and to be installed. So something's going on in the background while you're working, which is occupying considerable computing power of your computer, preparing the computer for an update that would be installed at the end of the day. That's why it says at the end of the day. So what do you want to do? Do you want to shut it down, or do you want to restart it after we upgrade it? But it is going to do the upgrade. It's not really giving you much of a choice about that. We're going to upgrade you. So what do you want to do after that? But I didn't know that at first. I didn't know that there were unknown factors, little secret influences that I could not see that were affecting my computer. But then I learned what they were, and I wasn't mystified anymore. This happens with us emotionally every day. We wonder why everything seemed to be fine, and then poof, it's not. We wonder why we're just flying along emotionally, seemingly untouchable. And then suddenly we become irritated or irritable. We spend so much time asking the question, why? Some people are absolutely obsessed with it. I get why questions all day long. This person said this and that person did that and on and on. And when I was a kid and then my boss is like, they're trying to figure out the why. There are so many potential influences in our lives, however, our genetics, our epigenome, our infancy, our childhood, things that happened that we don't remember, that why is often impossible to determine, like completely impossible. People will say, why do I do this? And I go, I don't know. They're looking for an answer. They figure I know the answer to all those questions. Could have been any of 10,000 things that happened to you when you were a kid, not one of which you remember. Who knows? Stuff just happens. My computer never lets me know that it's doing this background stuff. It just does it without my permission. And then at the end of the day, it sort of asks my permission. What would you like to do? We've been messing with your computer all day long. Now we're going to upgrade your computer. So would you like to shut it down or restart it? Both of which mean we're going to shut it down. Do you see? We're going to do this thing. And we've been messing with you all day long. Same thing happens in life. Our minds are going all day long, even when we're not conscious of it. Who knows what past events or present thought processes in the background are combining to create a given effect? Event, judgment, feeling, reaction. And very often, we don't know what events or judgments are affecting us in any given moment. Sometimes we do, but a lot of the time we don't, especially when we're triggered. Boom, suddenly we're triggered and we go, well, that's because, oh, you have no idea what caused it. For example, perhaps in the past, somebody said the word to you, disgusting, or somebody says it in the present. They just use the word disgusting, not even about you. And you don't remember that in the 4th grade, your teacher told you that you were disgusting and you felt humiliated, horrible, small, and in the case of the woman I was talking about earlier, bad, 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 whatever. And all triggered by somebody saying the word disgusting in the present. And we have lots of events like that. Lots as in tens of thousands of events like that we don't remember. Oh, then there's sleep. Just having a good night's sleep, which is constant thinking all night long without the modifying influences of the conscious brain. Oh my, who knows what shape you're going to wake up in? So there are thoughts running all over the place. Then there are dreams that make no sense. And if you're anything like me and dreaming, apparently we dream all night long and I never remember them. So here I've been dreaming all night long. My unconscious mind has been running crazy like horses off a cliff. And I wake up and wonder why, I don't know, I'm just feeling a little off or a little tired when I wake up. Because I've been running horses off a cliff all night long and didn't know it and don't remember it. Perhaps your parents screamed at you as a child about being responsible. And in a dream, you dream the word responsible. So now you're being triggered in your sleep, unknown to you. You're not even aware that you experienced the triggering, and you wake up with all those influences, having been triggered and responding to the trigger. Oh, it can be quite a mess. There is so much going on in our brains that we're not aware of, and it affects our thinking and how we feel. It affects judgments and feeling, which of course then lead to how we respond. Most of that will never be known to us. We will never figure them out, like events that occurred long ago that we have no conscious memory of, and no matter how thorough the hypnosis, we never will have memories of them. At times, I've just suddenly been in the middle of a day and experienced, I'm giving you another example of unknown influences, where I've just suddenly felt bad physically and not understood why. But I've certainly wondered why. And then many hours later, or sometimes the next morning, then I've gotten the symptoms of the cold that I had all along. What I was experiencing when I just suddenly felt bad is what in infectious disease they sometimes call viremia, where the virus just explodes and goes all over the place in your blood. But it doesn't settle in the end organs, the places that it's going to affect the most, and settle in and start causing the symptoms of congestion or sneezing or headache or whatever. The cold actually starts, it varies, 12, 24 hours, whatever, before the symptoms do. So you feel a little off. So I've learned that when I just suddenly start to feel bad physically, hang on, the cause usually shows up. So dwelling on why questions is often not helpful. And yet we ask that all the time. There are exceptions. You just screamed at your child, your 4-year-old, and you feel bad. Well, that's pretty clear why you feel bad. And why is that a useful question to ask why? Because, well, now you need to do something about it because you just emotionally gutted your kid. You just said something snippy to your wife. Well, probably a good idea to go in and say something to her about it. But no matter what the cause is, the answer is going to be the same. So we still don't need to spend that much time on why. You replace your fear or your anger or your whatever that's unproductive with what is true. You rewire the day. What am I doing? I'm being unloving. Do I want to keep this up? Well, not especially, since I can't think of any examples where that's ever turned out well. So what would I like to do instead? Well, there's what I would like to do, and then there's what I'm capable of doing. I could at least go in, and although I'm not quite capable of apologizing for being a complete jerk to my partner, not quite yet, it's a little fresh on my mind, I can go in and just hold her, hug her, kiss her neck, touch her hand, sit next to her, touch her elbow. I can do something to change things. So instead of why, the far more productive question is, what? What am I going to do? What am I doing now? What do I want to do? And what am I going to do? Those are useful questions. Next subject. I know a man who had a truly horrible marriage. Not real hard to find those. All trading. I'll do for you if you do for me. One of the worst marriages of trading I've seen in a long time. But it looked so good on the outside because his wife manipulated everything so that it did look good, and so that her controlling him looked good, and so that together they looked good. And he finally just had enough of being constantly controlled. She controlled him all the time. Now, he got something in return too, but it was miserable. And he tried to change the trading. He tried to replace the trading with love, and she went berserk. He finally had enough of the controlling and the lying and the manipulation. He tried unconditional loving, and she pretty much said this to him with her behavior and with her words. Yeah, I don't really care what you want. I've got the manipulative trading relationship I've always wanted. It's predictable. I like it. I come out ahead. I feel safe. I know what I'm doing. I can control you anytime I want to. So I'm not going to give that up. And I don't really actually believe there's such a thing as unconditional love anyway. Well, that's pretty clear. And he really tried. He didn't try for a day or a few days or a week or a month. He tried for months and months and got nowhere. She actually did him a favor by making no progress whatever because it wasn't confusing to him. She was not going to give up the rope around his neck. So he left. And when he did, his family turned on him. Everybody in his family turned on him. His parents, his siblings, his adult children. Why? Well, because everywhere she went, she talked about him. What a terrible person he was. And I got to hear a great number of the rumors, 90% of which were absolutely simply fabricated. The other 10% had an element of truth in them, but mixed in with enough lies that 100% of it was lies. Now, sure, certainly he made mistakes, but how she was describing him was just a complete lie. And he chose not to get involved in the drama. So all they heard was her side of the drama, that he was a really horrible, terrible, selfish, awful person. And because she was so good at creating the appearance of being a wonderful, caring, and kind person, even though behind the scenes, I've encountered very few people who are as vicious as this woman. So everybody believed her. Why wouldn't they? All they had was the role that she was playing on stage and the lines of the play that she was writing as she went. And he refused to participate in the play. And nobody really cared about his side of the story. So everybody believed her that he was a monster. So everybody turned on him. And now his family is still bugging him years later about not participating in the stage play where everyone pretends to be loving. Where do you think he learned to stay in a marriage for all of those years where it was all pretend? You think she taught it to him? No, he learned this at his mother's knee, at his mother's ankle. His mother taught him to pretend and to lie, that act like everything was fine. His father did. His siblings were taught by his parents, and so unwittingly, they participated in confirming that the play was real. And when he left the play, left his wife, although it was unconscious, it was an implied criticism of their lies. You see? Because he's saying, I don't want to live these lies anymore. And they went, oh, wait a minute. So are you implying that we've been lying all this time? Although he never told them that. But that's how they felt. So they had to support her. And they kept bugging him about coming back to the fold and assuming his old relationships in the old ways where he traded and lied just like they'd always done. And he wrote me and he said, yes, I see how I'm breaking away from the family, even though this has been going on for years. The old way in their world was ingrained in me, And to most family and friends, it seemed to work for years. Sure, because when people are trading relatively equally, everybody's, well, at least satisfied. They're not happy, but they're satisfied. It's all I knew. It's all they knew. I'm learning differently, that the old way was more of a trade governed by expectations and looking good. Yeah, no kidding. As they are proving now beyond doubt as you withdraw from the trade. If it were a genuinely loving relationship and you decided, well, I'm going to withdraw from this genuinely loving relationship, they'd say, well, okay. But no, they're having a fit, because as you withdraw from the trade, it's an implied accusation that they're trading, even though you're not stating it. If it had not been a trade all along, why would they bug you now about changing course and removing your part of the commerce? You continue. I used to do things out of obligation, looking good, getting along in control, and I'm beginning to see this more. It's still tempting to do that, the old habit, but I'm learning to see it. It's only through purposefully slowing down, which is another way of saying pausing, looking for the truth and checking on how I feel, that I can see things for what they really are. I would like to somehow find a way to have a relationship with my brother Bob, for example, but not like it was in the past, with him criticizing and attacking and constantly asking questions and prying and intruding. I don't know how to have a real relationship with Bob. I know that right now I would not be able to have any discussion about the whys or what happened with my marriage without some attacking on my part. So I can't go there. Do I continue to avoid him or attempt to have a relationship with him in a new way? And if so, what does that look like? There isn't anybody who's listening to this who doesn't have some variation on this, where some member of the family has peeled away because they've gotten sick of the trading. Or perhaps you have. Perhaps you've withdrawn. This happens in families everywhere. So listen to what I say to him in response to, how do I handle wanting to have a relationship with my brother? If you have any fear about this relationship with your brother, you'll blow it. So if you're afraid, don't even try. Because you're going to screw up and you're going to either get mad or you're going to go back into the old trading. When you have no emotional attachment to whether you have the relationship and no emotional attachment to how he responds, then you might say this to him, and probably in writing, because you'll be able to do it with less passion. Quote, this is just an example. I would love to explore a relationship with you, Bob. You do not have to change in any way. I will tell you, though, that if you want a relationship with me, we'd be pretty much starting over. There would be no talk about what you think about my past choices, like with my marriage. None at all. If you'd like to start over and see where we go with a relationship, then let's get together for lunch. Now, notice there's no accusation in there. You've been a terrible person. You've hurt my feelings. You sided with my wife, my ex-wife, blah, blah, blah. None of that. Nope. Here's what it would take to explore a new relationship with me. And I say lunch because lunch has a beginning and an end, as opposed to, why don't you just come on over to the house where he can launch into a tirade and start accusing you, and now you feel stuck. And now how do you get him to leave the house? So can we start a relationship over again? Yeah. Most people won't allow that because they're so deeply entrenched in their old ways of behaving. But is it possible? Oh, yes. And I've seen it done many times. And this is just one way to begin it. It's a loving way. And loving always works better than every other way combined. We'll see you in a week.